accessibility. For those who were able to join us for our last session, we had a pretty cool session on web application observability at scale that was done by Ngunga Georgine, and the video is on the YouTube channel. So feel free to check that out and reach out if you have any questions. Today's session is going to be done by Gertrude. She's a software engineer with a strong passion in accessibility, among other things, and we'll be talking about testing, amongst other things. So throughout the session, feel free to use the chat to ask some questions. If you're on the call, you can raise your hand and speak for maybe a minute or two, and we shall have a Q&A session at the end of the time as well, in the last, say, 10 to 15 minutes. So, yeah, and I hand it over to you, Gertrude.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining this call or this session to talk about, or to listen to me talk about web accessibility. So I'll have my video off as I present. Let me do that, then I'll share my screen. Yeah, let me know if you can see my screen. Can anyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. So yeah, thank you. Today we'll talk about testing for web accessibility. And like Chris mentioned, I am a software engineer, and most of my focus or my experience has been on the front end. And I'm also an accessibility advocate. So what this means is I spend time talking about, writing about, and giving workshops on web accessibility. And from this, I was able to start Accessibility Africa, which I run with Purity. And what we do basically is we just drive conversations around web accessibility, but with a focus on Africa. So the outline of this talk, it's going to be both theoretical and practical. So the testing part will be practical, so you can see what that is like. But I'll also have like theoretical slides where we can speak about accessibility, so you can have better context. So yeah, we will talk about what web accessibility is, the accessibility principles, and then I will show you the different users on the web and also how these different users use the web, so their patterns and their tools and the technologies that they use. Then we'll talk about how to test for these cases and scenarios, so the different patterns that we'll have talked about. Then I'll show you the different testing tools and also what to test for and which group it affects. And we will have like a comparison between automated and manual testing. So if this is your first time hearing about web accessibility, what is it? So there's so many diverse users on the web, and each of us uses the web very differently. There are those who prefer maybe the dark mode, those who prefer light mode, there are those who prefer to zoom their text, etc. So we are not all using the web the same way. And on top of that, there are people who are disabled, there are people who are aging, there are those who are having like situational and temporary impairments. We'll talk about that. So it's a very diverse experience on the web, and web accessibility is basically the practice of making the web inclusive for everybody, and it is a basic right. So what are web accessibility principles? So the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, I think most of you are familiar with it. They have a list of standards and principles to ensure that the web is usable by everyone. These principles are 4, and they're broken down into smaller guidelines, and those guidelines are also broken down into smaller sub-guidelines. So when you're actually testing for accessibility, you're testing against these guidelines. But on the general, there are 4, so we can talk about these 4. So the first one is perceivable, and what this means is that all users should be able to like perceive information that is on your website. Anyone who comes to your website should be able to understand it. An example of a way you can block some users from accessing your content is if you have like an image that has text, that contains text, so it's an image of text. A sighted user can be able to visit your site and they can be able to see this image and they can be able to perceive this information. But a blind user who has to use assistive technology, in this example, a screen reader. So a screen reader reads out content to the user, And when this screen reader encounters the image and there's no description attached to it, then the user will not be able to perceive this information. Another example would be like a color. If you're communicating information just by using color, so an example would be a chart. If you're trying to convey information, colorblind users will not be able, may not be able to perceive this information because they might just see a block of color, and then they'll miss the information that is being conveyed. And then the operable part, it means that all users can successfully operate interactive controls and elements. So whether your user is using a mouse, whether someone is using a keyboard, whether someone is tapping through, whether someone is using voice commands or they're waving, they should be able to interact successfully with your, like the interactive controls on your website. So it's like the buttons and like the form inputs, anything that needs the user to interact with, it should be successful for all users. Understandable information and operation of user interfaces can be understood by all users. Basically, no one should get confused when they come to your website. So having a clear structure and like having just a proper layout of your website is one way to ensure that your information or your content is understandable. One way you can sideline users for like understanding the content on your website is you can use CSS to shift the layout. So you can have the HTML section, but then you can use CSS to shift how the layout appears. And this is only advantageous to sighted users. Someone who's using a screen reader will have to rely on getting logic from the HTML. So in this scenario, they will get a little bit confused about like the your layout and like how content has been arranged on your page. So they'll have an issue with that. And then the last one is robust. So content is compatible with different browsers, user agents, and assistive technologies. So of course, anyone with whichever browser they're using should be able to access your website and the content. And then for someone who's using a screen reader, there's different screen readers for each device. So for the MacBook, there's VoiceOver for Mac. On Android phones, you have Android TalkBack, and on Windows machines, you have JAWS. So these are all different applications, but they should all be able to, the users of these different applications should be able to use your website. It's just the same way you build your web pages to fit different screen sizes of phones in the market. It's almost the same thing. So example of different users of the web is the ones who are called normal users. There are those who are aging, there are those who have permanent disabilities, and then those with temporary disabilities, situational disabilities as well, and those who are limited by their environments, and we're going to talk about all these. So for the permanent disabilities, these 5 groups that I have here, for the visual part, they're those with color blindness, low vision, and permanent blindness. Physical disabilities are those with non-functioning body parts or they have weak or slow muscles. And then hearing disabilities, permanent deafness, and also hard of hearing. Then there's the cognitive section. These are users who have memory and learning difficulties, concentration and problem solving. Then there's the neurological group. So it's a dysfunction in the brain or nervous system. And all these users interact with the web differently. For temporary and situational disabilities, these are disabilities that happen like in a limited time or in a particular context, but they demand that you use the accommodations that are provided for those with permanent disabilities. So for example, the temporary one, it affects you for a limited time. For example, you have a broken arm. When you have a broken arm, you cannot, if it's your right arm, you can't use your mouse, so you have to default to using the keyboard. And then a situational one, it happens in particular contexts or situations. For example, misplacing your eyeglasses, which is something I do a lot. And when that happens, I have to use Zoom. So I have to zoom the content on the screen. And in that scenario, you should ensure that your content does not become wonky because someone is zooming. Or if you are in a noisy place and someone sends you a video and you do not have your earphones, in that scenario, like closed captions would be good for you to be able to consume this particular information. So how do different users use the web and what are their patterns and their tools? Before we move to this section, I'd like to mention that these groups of users, they're not like a monolith. So in as much as I'm going to give general examples of patterns, it's just what you generally find in the group, but they don't all use these particular patterns. It helps, it's just general, like the common patterns that you can find in this group, and it's to help guide and understand what to test for. So for the visually impaired ones, the tools that they use, they use a screen reader. So a screen reader I've already explained, it reads out the content to the user. They use refreshable Braille displays, so text is converted to Braille text, so you can consume somebody's website through Braille. And they use speech recognition software to perform actions. In this example, I have Siri. So the patterns that they have, they rely on keyboard navigation. So anyone who's using a screen reader will rely on keyboard navigation. Then they scan the page content with screen readers. So the same way a sighted user can visit our website and they can see the different heading sections and also the sections on the page and get an idea of what information is there, screen reader users can also do the same, but they do rely on like the HTML content and how it has been structured. So if you structure your page in a correct way, then you can easily give them like a brief scan of your page and they can be able to know what content is there. They zoom pages to be able to read. This is something that I do a lot. So you zoom because I'm also short-sighted, so I need the fonts to be a bit bigger. Then they rely on image descriptions, like I've already mentioned. If you have an image, provide like an alternative description for it because they cannot see the images. For those who are physically impaired, the tools that they use alternative keyboards and head ones and mouth sticks. They also use speech recognition tools like Siri. The patterns, they rely on keyboard navigation as well, and they make use of search to find content because they are having problems with moving their limbs. It might be problematic to like use a mouse or keep on tapping on the keyboard, so they rely on voice, and that they make use of search to find content. So those who are hearing impaired, they make use of speech-to-text tools. And the patterns with this group is they rely on closed captions for video content, they rely on transcripts for audio content, and they rely on visual cues. So for example, if there's something that a user is supposed to do on your site, but you've only provided audio as instruction, a deaf user will miss that. So you also need to provide an alternative visual cue for them to follow. So how do you test? So that's just an example of a group or groups on the internet. So how do you test for this? So there are two ways to test. The first one is through automated testing. So these tools, they run checks on your site, and then they provide a list of accessibility violations that have been found. And they run these checks against the principles that we've already talked about, and then they give you information about which particular principle you violated. So they provide you information of why it's important to fix them, which rule you're breaking, and how to also fix them. These tools are actually very, very helpful. And I recommend it to anyone who wants to start with web accessibility or wants to introduce a web accessibility culture into their team. It's a very good tool, and they're very easy to set up. The manual testing one, it means like a human has to perform the accessibility checks as opposed to relying on a tool. And this is necessary as automated tools do not catch all accessibility issues. So an example would be a tool can tell that an image does not have an alternative text. And if you add the alternative text, it will like pass that image, but you might have just added like jumbled up words. So that descriptive text does not actually make sense. So you would need a human to be able to do that testing. So example of testing tools that I will use for this session, the automated ones are Wave, which I heavily use, Web Accessibility Evaluation Tool. And then we have Accessibility Insights. There's the fast pass option that's automated. Then you have Cypress Axe, which is the library. So you install it, and then you will import it into your Cypress tests, and there's a function that you invoke, and it runs the checks for you. And then the manual part, you'll have to manually do keyboard navigation to see how people are actually navigating on your site. You'll also have to manually do screen reader testing. So this might be a little bit difficult because you'll have to learn how screen reader users use their screen readers and like the commands that they use so that you can be able to perform this testing. And then accessibility insights as well. It has like manual steps in case you're not sure how to perform the manual testing. It provides the steps for you to follow. And then there is a tab early tool, which helps with tabbing order, and I'll show you what that means. And then there's colorblindly, which helps you see your website the way colorblind users see. And then there's the WebAx color contrast checker. This helps you check like your color contrast, and we'll talk about why that's important. So from the list of the patterns, like from the patterns that we've seen from the users, a few things stand out as important to test for, to be able to cater for all these users. So this is not an exhaustive list, it's just examples, but it's a good list to start with. So checking your HTML semantics, keyboard navigation and functionality, headings and page structure, form labels and errors, image descriptions, color contrast, and then proper link descriptions, and video captions, transcripts, and subtitles. And we'll look at how to test all these. So how do we test? HTML semantics, why it matters. This is the most important one because most accessibility violations are caused by a lack of proper HTML semantic use. So an example would be using a lot of divs and sections instead of using like you have the main element, you have the header element, you have like the buttons and the headings. Making use of those actually improves the accessibility of your site. And then, give me a minute. So I need to just... Yeah, so HTML semantics are important. So you need to use the correct HTML semantics in your website. And the importance of this is because accessibility is baked already into them. So you don't have the extra work of having to build in accessibility into your website because you're using non-semantic elements. And it provides like a good experience for keyboard navigation and screen readers. So manual testing, you will have to ensure that you're using the correct HTML semantic elements, and you should also check your code. The automated testing, it will just flag when there's no heading or layout structure elements on your website. So right here, I have a demo. So if I come to this is a page. It's just like a basic page, and it makes sense for a sighted user. But I've built this entire thing with just divs and styling. When if you hover here, it gives you that feedback of this is a link. If you come to this button, it gives you the same thing. So for a sighted user, this makes sense, and they can be able to perceive the information here. But for a user who is using a screen reader, they will struggle with this. So if I run a check here with the Wave tool, which is an automated tool, it gives me, so a yellow and a red are errors, the issues that you have. And then a green and blue and purple tells you that you've done the right thing. So if I come to this, it tells me that I have no heading structure. So the page has no headings, so that's feedback already. And if I come to the reference, it tells me what it means. The page has no heading and why it matters. Headings provide important document structure, outlines, and navigation functionality to assistive tech users. Then it also gives you how to fix it and the standards and the guidelines that you're breaking. Here as well tells me I have no page regions. The same thing, why it matters, what it means, no page regions or area landmarks are found. Why it matters, regions and area landmarks identify significant page areas. So it gives you like information that's like good information to help you with web accessibility. So if I come to this page, the page that I've just shown you right now, this is the code for it. So it's just divs. And then I have added like the styles based on what I want it to look like. Another way to test for it would be with this, the accessibility, what is this, Cypress X. I already have it running, so I can run it again. And if I click, I can see I have 3 errors here. So if I click on one, it tells me the same thing. Ensure that the page, or at least one of its frames, contains a level 1 heading. And then it gives me a link that will describe for me what the issue is and why I need to fix it. So here, how to fix the problem and why it matters in the rule description. So the errors are always very helpful, and they give you information about it. So even if I try to tab through it, it's going to be problematic. So if I have usually the sections of your page where your user interacts with like links and buttons and form elements and what else, like radio buttons and all. So a mouse user can be able to do this, but if I try to tab through, it's going to be problematic. The only sections of this page where I'm using the correct element are this form and this subscribe button because of a demo I'm going to use to do later. But right now I can't tab through this particular page because I am not using the correct semantic elements. So the extra work that has to come is I need to now start building in accessibility features. So for now, if I want to have the keyboard navigate to it, I'll have to add a tab index attribute here. So in all of this, I want to be able to tab through them. So if I save it and then I come back here and I start tabbing, you can see now the focus appears on home and about and contact us. But you see, this is just a basic, like I still have to now add the links where I want it to go. Then I also have to add that functionality of going to that particular link. And then that functionality has to be enabled by on click and also by pressing the space bar and pressing all this. So it gives you extra work using like the wrong HTML semantic elements. You get more out of accessibility if you're using the correct semantic elements. So if I come here to, let me actually do this so we can compare them. Yeah, same page, same styling and everything, but now I'm using the correct semantic elements. So like here you have the header, I have the navigation, I have the unordered list, I have the main section, I have the article, H1, H2, all the way to the footer. It even makes your code more readable for someone who wants to make additional changes. It's easier for them to know where to go as opposed to coming to like a block of divs. So right now, if I run the page, the testing tool, you see I get like the blue and it tells me like I have the header and everything. If I come to the structure now, I have the header, navigation, the main section, H1, and then the articles, H2, H3. So this is what's presented to a screen reader. So now a screen reader user can also be able to skim through like they can scan the content on your website. And if I want to tab through it, then it's already baked into it, so I don't have to do extra work. So the next thing would be keyboard navigation and functionality. So why does this matter? Assistive tech, e.g. screen readers, they rely on keyboard navigation. And then focus and tabbing order communicate the logical structure of the page to screen reader users. And then the focus communicates to sighted users where they are on the page, and keyboard functionality ensures a user performs the same actions as a mouse. So let's begin with the focus and tabbing order. So when I come to the previous one, the bad semantic HTML, I have like a tabbing order right now. So I start with home, then about, then contact us, then the input field, etc. So if I use this tool called the tab alley what it's going to do is it's going to tab through my site and then it's going to give me like an explanation or like an image that shows how a user will tab through. So it will start with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this makes sense. This is how you want your user to tab through your application. If I change the tabbing order, like right now, I will give this a higher number. When I give them 0, it follows like the structure, like the logical structure. But if I want a particular element to have priority when a user is tabbing, then you give them you give it a number that's bigger than 0. So right now, if I've given this contact as like more priority when it comes to tabbing. So if I run this tool, what happens is you can see I'm starting with 0, then 1, 2, then 3, and 4. So this does not make sense. So it's important for you to, as you're building your applications, to ensure that you are periodically checking your tabbing order and ensuring that the users who use the keyboard are able to have like a logical a logical tabbing order on your site. Then the other thing was the focus. So this focus, the blue thing, it's actually very, very important because it gives users feedback on where they are on your page. Sometimes developers remove this because they feel like it's ugly, and that makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't fit with your styling, like with your design. So instead of removing it, what you can do is you can change the styling. So like right now, I'm still able to see where I am on the site, but I'm using like different styling that maybe probably fits in more with whatever design I have here. But the most important thing is that you should not remove this focus because it gives feedback to your users about where they are on the page. So a demo on one of the website that has this issue is with Safaricom. Right now, I can come to personal, and then business, then about us using my touchpad. So you can see it gives me feedback. I'm able to actually see where I am. And if you look at the bottom, like right here at the bottom, you can see, so there's about landing, investor relations, etc. But if I start tabbing through, you can see at the bottom it shows that I'm tabbing. But if you look at the navigation bar, it doesn't give me any feedback. So it's easy to get lost about where exactly I am on the page. And that's the problem with removing the focus. So in terms of testing, you can only manually test. So tabbing through the keyboard and check the order and ensure that it's logical. And then you can perform actions with the keyboard, i.e. the space and the enter, does it work? So sometimes we build, if you're building like your own link, so you build all these accessibility features, but then you can only be able to perform the action using a mouse. The space and the enter do not work. So you need to also check for this. And then does the focus pattern show as you are tabbing through? So just exactly what I've shown you right now. Which group it affects? The screen reader users. It affects also the blind users. This is for the keyboard navigation. And then the temporary disabled users who cannot maybe use their mouse now have to do keyboard navigation. Users who lose their mouses often, and then those with physical disabilities. Then headings and page structure. So this is important as well because you need to provide structure to screen reader users. And those are people who have physical disabilities or those who are blind. So it matters because proper heading usage and page structure gives screen reader users comprehensive content. And all users definitely benefit from comprehensive content. And it's important to test that screen reader users can comprehend the page just as well as sighted users. So automated testing, it will display your web structure just like what we did here. If I do the wave tool and I come to the structure, this is the structure that will be presented to the screen reader user. So this tool helps you with that. And then it highlights possible headings. So if it comes across your site and it sees a section that has maybe like a writing or a text that looks like it could be a header, it gives you those hints. For manual testing, you need to check the semantics to ensure that you're using the correct heading 1 or heading 1 to 6 elements, and then also use a screen reader to just see what the experience of that person is. So an example of a website that has an interesting heading structure is this one, Kappa, Chris. So as you look at it, you can see there's this section which looks like the main heading. So the first is way to pay your suppliers, etc. Then you can come here. There's also this section. It has a heading. It has a header for that section, and then there's content. Then also there's this other one all the way to the bottom. So a sighted user can easily make sense of this. You can see what's there. And now if you run the wave tool and you come to the structure, you only have heading 1 and heading 2. So a screen reader user will be like, oh, this site only has H1 and H2. Like these are the only sections on the page, unless they now start like navigating through and going to the content. And the heading 2 here is actually a description. It shouldn't be a header. Heading 2 should possibly be this. And then you can see it gives you this like highlights, tells you this text appears to be a heading, but is not a heading element. And then it tells you why it matters. So heading elements provide important document structure, outlines, and navigation functionality to assistive tech users. So yeah, the rest of this content cannot yet be perceived by screen reader users. They can only get this if they want like a summary of the website. And this is usually like a case of using p tags, and then you style them to look like headings. If you look at the code, you can see it's a p tag. So they're using semantic HTML, but it's still incorrect for the case that they're using it for. And then you have form labels and errors, and this is one of the most important ones because forms are always there everywhere. So why it matters, because screen reader users, they need labels in forms to be able to read them out to their users. If I come back here to my demo and I have this form here, it makes sense. Like you can look at it and it's like a personal details form. Then you have your first name and your last name and everything. But the problem is that placeholder text are not read out by screen readers. So this is only something that a visual user can be able to use. A screen reader user will just hear input, 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 and then there's no description. So they won't know what exactly you want from them. And so they won't be able to fill this form. And then visually impaired users can miss the placeholder text because of low contrast. So usually in forms that have placeholder text, the text itself is usually more like sometimes you can't even see it. So those who are visually impaired can also miss it. And then red error highlights only do not communicate to colorblind users. So I'll show you a demo of that. And then the other issue with placeholder text is even if I start filling and then I forget what I was supposed to be filling, the only way to go back and get the information is to delete. So even sighted users will still have a problem. So if I do the wave tool right now, I will get an error. So it gives me this. It tells me I'm missing a form label. And if I go to the reference, again, why it matters, how to fix it, the rules that I'm breaking. And then it also can show me the code, like exactly where it is. I do not have, so all these four do not have like input. Sorry, they do not have a label for them. So if I come to the testing, the automated tool will flag the form inputs without labels, just like we've seen right now. And then manually, you need to check your code and ensure each input has a label description and that proper error messages are provided. So if I come to my, right now I have like I'm using now semantics, but now I have a form that's problematic because I only have just inputs here. So I need, this tells me that I need to add labels to the form. So right now, if I come to the accessible form, now this is more descriptive. So I have the label outside. The screen reader can now access this and it will read it out to the user and tell them it's a first name and it's required. And then at the bottom, I have description of the information that I need on this form. So you can still make use of placeholder text the way you want, but also provide labels and descriptions at the bottom. So if I look at the code right now, I have the label right here, and then the input below it, and it's connected by ID. So this is first name, and then this is also first name. And then there's this interesting bit here. So ARIA described by ARIA are attributes and roles that help to improve the accessibility of your website. So this is here, for a sighted user, they can be able to read it. For a screen reader user, they will need to have a way to know that this particular description is for this input. And so you give it an ID, you connect them also by ID. So when the screen reader gets to this input, it describes this input with this text. So they will still be able to get that information to help them fill the form. So who it affects everyone in that case. Then you have image descriptions. This matters because only sighted users can comprehend an image. Blind users and those who are visually impaired will have a hard time perceiving the image content if it lacks like a descriptive text. So if I come here to access, I can do this is an accessible image. For this, you can see two images and they have quotes, but if I go to my code, I just have like an image tag and the SRC, there's nothing else there. So if I run I think I'll use this one now, the accessibility insights, the first pass. It gives me these two errors. So it tells me I have like two images and they do not have alternative text or a role. And it also gives you how to fix, and it tells you so it's nth child 1 and nth child 2 etc, and it gives you like how to fix them. If I do let me refresh it. If I use the other tool, this is the one I usually prefer, it gives you the same thing, missing alternative text. So what happens is you just need to add, if I come to the good image right here, now I have an alternative text and I have this one that has an empty one, and I'll explain that right now. So if I run the wave tool again, I can see I'm getting a green. So it tells me that I have this information for the alternative text. So this empty one is only for images that are for aesthetic purposes, like a screen reader user doesn't really care about it. Whether they know about the image or not, it doesn't impact their experience or like the information that they need. So whenever something is just for aesthetic, you should still give it an alternative text, but give it an empty text. And then for the description of the text, you should refrain from starting it with photo of or image of, because the screen reader already reads image because of this the HTML semantics. So it already reads image, and then now you provide the description. So this is quote by Tim Berners-Lee, the power of something something. So if I close my eyes and this description is read out to me, then I can be able to know what's there. Let me close this. So the automated testing, it will just flag images without alternative text. But for the manual, you'll have to check if the alternative description makes sense. So for example, if I just come here and I write my own things, like you see, it passes it, but the description itself does not make sense. So it's even a worse experience for a screen reader user than no description, because it's more confusing now. So who it affects: screen reader users, and then users with poor internet connection. So when you are having issues with images loading, the alt text is displayed, and so the user can be able to read the description of what was supposed to be there, and they wouldn't have to wonder what kind of image was supposed to show there. And then color and color contrast. So color is very important. We know how color can affect your actions on a site. We know how it can maybe repulse you, or it can make you want to stay in a site longer because like they're using good color. So it has that psychological aspect to it. But at the same time, we have colorblind users, and we also have blind users who cannot be able to perceive, who cannot be able to see like the color. So colorblind users may not perceive information portrayed by color alone, and then visual and cognitive impaired users may struggle with poor color contrast. So I'm going to show you about like what the color contrast is about. So automated testing, what will happen? It will flag your color contrast issues. Color contrast is about having like the foreground color and the background color. They should have enough contrast so someone can be able to read. Manually testing, you can enter the foreground and background shades, and then use a tool to get the contrast. This usually happens mostly during design before you start even building out the page. Then you can check with Colorblind Tool to see how colorblind users are perceiving your website. So an example of a tool like this is Trello right now, and Trello usually has labels with color right here. So with someone who can see the colors, they can be able to see the different colors, the labels on this particular card, and the labels represent different information. So if I use a tool for a colorblind person, this is Colorblindly. If I come to the person who just sees black and white, right now they can't perceive this information. It's just two blocks of things, and they can't really tell what is what. So you're supposed to add, if you want to portray information with color, you should add it with text. You should accompany it with text or using patterns. So here I see they added text, and this is good. So you can be able to tell what color it is. but it's still problematic because now if you have more than 20 colors, then you're giving that person extra tasks to be able to like keep up and know which is which. So that's one example. The other one is with color contrast. So color contrast is, it ensures, so this is a tool that checks for color contrast. The problem is, first of all, it has like, there's a ratio that you're supposed to meet, which is 4.5, to ensure that it can be readable by most of your users. But if it goes below that, then it flags and you start having issues. So right now, you can see it's becoming a bit difficult to read. If I increase the, like, it becomes a little bit difficult to read if the color contrast is not at 4.5, which is the required contrast ratio. So a site that has a problem with that is the Africa's Talking. And I think it's one of the, this highlights why it's important to think about accessibility before you begin working on your product, because now this is their branding color. So shifting it is going to be a very big decision, because now they already have swag, and like when you see this color, this is what is Africa's Talking color. So changing it is going to be an issue. So if you come here, you can see they have 56 contrast errors. So yeah, you can have users who will come to their site and they will have an issue, like just how we've been struggling with this right now. So there's a user who will see that site this way. And that's why it's important to have this done in the very beginning, from design all the way to testing. So those are the two examples that I had for colors. And then also users who are using, if you try to access some applications in the sun and it has like really poor contrast, you won't be able to see it. But those websites that have good contrast, you'll be able to like see from the screen when you're under the sun. Then there's proper link description. So why does this matter? So screen reader users will need links to have more descriptive text, because they are able to list out all the links on your site. So if you have so many links that are saying read more, it's problematic for them, because they'll just hear read more link, read more link, read more link, and they won't know where exactly they are going. So it's a very vague description of a link. So automated tests currently do not catch these ambiguous links. So you need to check for them manually and provide for proper description. So an example of a site that has the read more, you have here with Twigger. So there's this read more, read more, read more. So a screen reader user will just get read more, read more, read more stacked on them, and they won't know where they're going. So if I run this tool right now, you can see it gives me it catches other errors. So this is a redundant link. It means there are two links going to the same place. So right now, this is a link. This link and this link are both going to the same place. So that's not advised. And then you have also color contrast issues here. So a way that you can fix this is to provide, probably here you can, first of all, you need to determine which one you want as the link. So it could be this or it could be that. So you do not have a redundant link. And then you could possibly say, read more about Twigger on TechCrunch, read more about Twigger on 100 Most Influential, read more about Twigger on CNN, etc. That's more descriptive. So an example would be, for BBC, if you look at their links, they are very descriptive. So this is what will be listed to the screen reader users, like Russia claims winning Ukrainian sham votes. So a user with a descriptive text, with a screen reader will be able to have all this listed to them and in a very descriptive manner, and that's a better experience. So who it affects: screen reader users and then blind users, and also those with neurological impairments. Then video captions and audio transcripts and subtitles. So why it matters, because deaf users rely on caption and subtitles as an alternative to audio content. Then general users rely on subtitles when the audio language is not what they understand. So if you have any video or audio content, you should be able to provide closed captions for it. So for example, this video...
Control of the British economy.
So you can see they provide the closed caption. Most of BDC's videos usually have them. If I come to this one as well.
I fell in love with boxing when I experienced how satisfying it was to not.
So you can see they provide the closed caption. So a deaf user can still be able to consume this content as opposed to it just being a video with no closed captions. And then for the subtitles, that affects everyone. If you're watching a Korean movie, you usually switch to English subtitles. That helps everybody. And then for the transcripts, you should be able to provide transcripts for the audio content that you have. So this is an example of a podcast that I like listening to. It's called Front End Happy Hour. Whenever they upload their podcast, they usually have a transcript at the bottom, so the episode transcript. So you can just come and read this instead of having to listen. It helps everybody, like in general. So if you don't have like 1 hour, you can just come and skim through also the transcript, and that's a good experience. Yeah. I think something else. So manually, you need to check for availability of transcripts. You need to check for closed captions in videos, and you need to check that the captions are well timed. So what this means is the caption should be shown at the right time, because if it shows maybe later or earlier on, it gives the user a confusing experience. So you need to put them at just the right time. So something that I've realized I haven't talked about is for the form, something that we always, okay, not always, sometimes you will find happening is when you have a form and you try to submit and you haven't maybe filled a particular form field, usually you might find you'll find this red thing that shows the border. And if it doesn't have an accompanying error message, it's going to be problematic for colorblind users to understand or to see what the issue is. So of course, for those who are seeing black and white, then they won't be able to see it. For those who are red blind, they also won't be able to see it. So that's important to note. And then something else I would also want to mention is with this tool, it's an automated testing tool, but currently it checks, okay, the way I've written it right now, it checks the entire DOM, like the entire page. But if you want it to just check a particular section of the page, for example, for that form, I can do this, and then for the form, for the button itself, I think, yeah, so I have a button class. So if I run it again, what will happen is it now clicks the button and it has the red, but as you can see, it's still problematic because it cannot catch that violation. But I'm just showing you that so that you can sometimes accessibility issues come when the user is interacting with the website. So if you want to run an accessibility check on a particular section of the page after a user has done a particular action, then you can be able to do that as well. The other thing you can also be able to do with this tool is to get the most critical issues on your web page. So like right now, wait, I said critical. This is bad semantics. Oh, okay. Yeah, this is critical. So it says that I do not have, pages should contain one level heading. Oh, sorry. Yeah, because I was wondering, I'm running two of them. Yeah, this is not catching the critical one, because if you look at this, impact is moderate. I don't have any critical issues on my website. There are some accessibility violations that are very, very critical. So you need to, if you want to catch the most critical ones, because those are the ones that can get you into like a lawsuit, you can be able to use this tool to catch those. So I'll end by saying that it's like having accessibility issues on your site is not a problem. What's problematic is not knowing that you have accessibility issues on your website, or knowing and not doing anything about it. So it's just like the way you continuously improve like the performance of your website or the responsiveness is something that you keep keep working on. But if you're not aware of it and you're not putting any effort, then you will be like having engineers who are producing inaccessible code if you have like a team that doesn't care about this. So in conclusion, it's important to learn more and understand about web accessibility. And then automated testing tools are great to start with for catching accessibility violations. But they only catch a small number of accessibility issues. And you need to, after that, like if you can't catch, because they catch a small number of accessibility issues, you default to manually testing your website for these accessibility issues. So yeah, that's all. Thank you. Before I get to questions, I wanted to talk about, we have an upcoming accessibility talk with Accessibility Africa, and we have Austin Roy who will be talking about accessibility for React applications. And then I do not have a poster, but Purity will be talking about ARIA, which I just mentioned right now. She'll be giving an introduction to that. Yeah, I will now take questions. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Yeah, as we wait for questions, I think anyone who has a question and is on the call, feel free to type it on the chat or speak up. We had one comment from Paul on the live stream, and he was just talking about how we can also use CSS to lint for alt cases on images, I guess. I think he is providing another way of specifying descriptions for images, which would be using CSS. And like, I don't know if this is like a CSS query or something, but just being able to insert or provide alternative content for, sorry, not alternate the content for the alternative field by CSS. So that's interesting. And yeah, Henry says good talk. I see a question from Brian Howie on the chat saying, is Kenya doing anything impactful on web accessibility?
Well, not just Kenya, Africa as a whole is lagging behind in terms of accessibility. So we do not even have any legal policies. While outside you can get into a lawsuit, you can be sued if you have accessibility issues. Right now in Africa, we do not have any strong laws. In Kenya, we just started, I think in 2019, there was an ICT something that was passed in Kenya for web accessibility, for accessibility in general, digital accessibility, that's what they called it. So that's all I know about Kenya and Africa in general. And I guess that's why we started this community, because it's quite important. It doesn't, like in Africa, we still have people who are disabled and we have different users on the web. So we need to be building applications that cater for them. So one way you can know it's still problematic here is if you go to the government websites. They're all very inaccessible, most of them. Any other question? Or did I answer your question, Howie? Do you feel like... Did you have any comment you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, I think you've answered it. I think probably in one of the other talks you talked about Kenya building its first ICT accessibility standard.
Yes.
Possibly. Yeah, I was just wondering if that's also, is it still ongoing or maybe has it stalled? Not too sure.
Yeah. So there hasn't been much information as well since that announcement. I haven't heard anything else afterwards.
Cool. But yeah, I think you've answered.
Okay. Any other?
Yeah, I have a question. So you might have already touched on this, but then I'm wondering if this is something that this accessibility testing is something that we can easily incorporate into CI pipelines.
If it's... Sorry, I didn't get it.
All right, so if it's something that we can easily incorporate into CI pipelines. So basically, prevent people from deploying if the code that they just wrote violates any of these things.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure about the CI. I'm only sure about the integration test, which is the Cypress Axe and the PX Ali. So if your CI build has to ensure that your integration test passed before deploying, then you can put your accessibility test there. So if it fails then you're going to, it won't deploy because does that answer you, Mark? The other ones would be, because now the you will still have issues going to your website that are inaccessible, and that's why you need to have the manual test. You do have people who focus on accessibility, so after you do the deployment, then before it actually goes to production, the QA team has to test with screen readers and do the manual. Then yeah, because you can only catch those issues manually. There isn't like technology to be able to tell you automated test, or like your images do not have like the description does not make sense. Some of it still has to be manual.
Very cool.
Nice. I have one curious question as well. Do we have anything sort of like, there's this tool that we use, I think it's called Lighthouse. Is there anything that, like Lighthouse, that can just do tests on any website as provided before having to incorporate any specific libraries or tools?
So I think we lost Gertrude. She might be having internet connection issues. So if anyone else on the call would like to chime in, Bansa. Birer, maybe.
Hi, Big Zoo. I think I'm not sure if you can test everything using the Chrome Dev tools at the moment. I think that's why, because a lot of the things will end up having to test using tools like for the most part. Yeah, but I think the tools that Security shared, they're usually really good at that. But I think browsers are also trying to. Can you hear me?
There's a bit of background noise, but we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
Hello? Sorry.
Yeah, much better now.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, sorry. Yeah. I was saying, like, I think browsers are also improving how you can do accessibility testing, but at the moment, just the individual testing from the individual browser, I think it's not sufficient. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for a quick answer. So I think we're almost at time, and we still have lost Gertrude.
No,
There
yeah.
she is.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Mark, I'm not sure if I completed your answer, but I had Purity talking, so I'm not sure if you have your answer now.
Yeah, you answered. I think you finished answering, and Purity has just answered another question.
Also, sorry, just one more thing. On Safari, if you want to test screen reader on Safari, it has a good voiceover tool if you're using Safari, so you can go through your entire site as a screen reader would. Yeah. I think you just press F5 if I'm not wrong.
Nice. Cool. Thanks for that tip again. I see one question from Alvin on the chat. Maybe we can take the last one. Does dark mode introduce any complexities to some of these practices?
Yeah, that's a good question. The one I can think of with dark mode is with color contrast. So whenever you use the dark mode theme on your website, you should make sure that you are testing for the color contrast issues, because sometimes you might have some text that appears very well on light mode, but then when you switch to dark mode, you're having contrast issues. So that's one I can think of. Yeah.
Cool. And yeah, just reminder for everyone, Gertrude and PUT have or run Accessibility Africa, and they do sessions very often. So definitely check out their websites and sessions to learn more on the topic. Any closing remarks from you, Gertrude, or anyone, Mark, before we end the session?
Yeah, first, I'd love to say thanks to everyone who's joined. It was really wonderful. I hope I have been able to share information that can help you start thinking about web accessibility as you build your products. Something else I'd mention is we always write articles after every talk that we give. Okay, it's an Accessibility Africa practice. So I do have tech article for this particular talk that I will just publish immediately after this, and then I will share with everyone. And that's all. Thank you so much, guys.
Nice. And thank you, Gertrude. Bye, everyone, and see you same time, same place in